I've already told you no, the gas station manager Brad snarled, his voice dripping with a casual disdain. You can't pump gas here. This isn't a charity. Diana, desperate and confused, could only plead with him. Please, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. I just need enough to get to the next station. My tank is on empty. But Brad didn't care. In fact, a flicker of cruel amusement danced in his eyes. He seemed to relish her desperation. That's not my problem, he said with a shrug. The next station is about an hour away. Maybe you should have thought of that before pulling in here. Diana's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white with rage. You can't just refuse me service for no reason. That's when Brad stepped forward, invading her personal space. What he said next made the blood of everyone watching run cold. I can refuse service to anyone I want, he hissed. Especially people like you who don't belong here. Now get in your little car and pray you make it. They were going to strand her, in the middle of nowhere, an hour from help, with an empty tank. This wasn't just discrimination, this was dangerous. But what Brad didn't know was that Diana Williams was not just any customer, and he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. If you stand against this kind of injustice, hit that subscribe button, type yes, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments, because this story is about to deliver the kind of karma you won't soon forget. Earlier that day, Diana Williams had been driving for hours, her heart filled with excitement. At 42 years old, she was the CEO and founder of the Williams Energy Corporation, a gas station empire she had built from the ground up. Her company now owned 848 locations across the country, making her one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the energy sector. The journey hadn't been easy. It began 20 years ago with a single, struggling gas station. Diana had worked 16-hour days, pumping gas herself, cleaning restrooms, and doing whatever it took to keep the business alive. She'd faced down suppliers who refused to work with a young black woman and battled banks that questioned her acumen. But Diana persevered, driven by a vision to create a company that would serve every customer with dignity and respect. Year after year, she had poured every penny back into the business, opening a second location, then a third. Now, 2 decades later, Williams Energy was a billion-dollar corporation with nearly 850 locations, coast to coast. She employed over 12,000 people and served millions of customers a day. She had achieved the American dream, but she never forgot where she came from or the values that fueled her success. But today wasn't about business. It was about family. Diana was making the long drive to Stanford University for her daughter Sarah's graduation. She'd been pulling 80-hour weeks for months, expanding into new markets, but she had promised herself that nothing would keep her from this moment. Sarah was graduating with a degree in engineering, and Diana couldn't have been prouder. Her daughter was brilliant, driven, and compassionate, everything Diana had hoped she would become. This graduation wasn't just Sarah's achievement, it was the culmination of Diana's own dreams. She had built her empire not for herself, but to create a better future for the next generation. As the Nevada desert unfolded around her, Diana thought of how far they had both come. She remembered the late nights at that first station, Sarah doing her homework in the back office, the sacrifices they'd both made. And now, her daughter was graduating from one of the most prestigious universities in the world. It was then that Diana noticed the blinking fuel light. She'd been so lost in thought that she hadn't paid attention to the gauge, which was now dangerously low. She needed to stop, and soon. Her GPS showed several options ahead: a Shell, an Exxon, a BP. She could have stopped at any of them. But then, something caught her eye that made her smile. Just ahead, in Riverside, Nevada, was a Williams Energy station, one of her own. In that moment, Diana made a decision that would change everything. Instead of pulling into a competitor's station, she decided to visit her own. She'd been meaning to conduct a few unannounced inspections anyway. As CEO, she knew the only way to truly understand her business was to see it through the eyes of a customer. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Early in her career, after receiving complaints about poor service, she had visited the location in her business suit, flanked by her executive team. Naturally, everything was perfect. It wasn't until she returned later, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, that she witnessed the rude behavior customers had described. Since then, surprise visits had become her standard practice. So that morning she had dressed simply: jeans and a faded Stanford sweatshirt, a nod to her daughter's accomplishment. She wanted to look like any other mom on a road trip, blending in, observing. As Diana pulled into the station, she saw it was busy. It was a Friday evening, buzzing with local families, teenagers grabbing snacks, and workers stopping by after their shifts. It was the kind of bustling activity she loved to see. But as she sat in her car, observing the staff, her pride began to curdle. There was Brad Patterson, the manager, who carried himself with a possessive swagger, barking orders at employees and customers alike. His sidekick, Tommy Rodriguez, seemed to hang on his every word, laughing too loudly at every joke. And then there was Jessica Chen, a young employee who kept her head down, moving quickly and nervously, as if trying to remain invisible. What Diana saw next made her stomach clench. She watched as white customers were greeted with warm smiles and friendly chatter. Brad joked with them, offered to help them, and made them feel welcome. When a man's credit card was declined, Brad handled it discreetly. But then, an elderly black man, polite and well-dressed, approached the counter. He asked for help with the air machine for his tires. Diana watched in horror as Brad barely looked up. "Machine's over there," he grunted, gesturing dismissively. "Figure it out." No help, no directions, just cold dismissal. The man, though clearly hurt, maintained his dignity and walked away. As he did, Diana saw Tommy lean in and whisper something to Brad. Both of them chuckled, mocking the customer behind his back. Diana's heart sank. This was her business, bearing her name. Her employees were poisoning everything she had worked so hard to build. This wasn't just poor service. It was the very prejudice she had fought her entire life. She was angry, disappointed, and shocked. She had clear, zero-tolerance policies against discrimination. How could this be happening? But she couldn't jump to conclusions. She needed to experience it herself. Taking a deep breath, she checked her reflection one last time and got out of her car. She hadn't even made it halfway to the pumps when Brad stormed out of the store, his face a mask of irritation. "Excuse me," he demanded, his tone instantly hostile. "Where do you think you're going?" Diana was stunned. She hadn't said a word, hadn't done a thing. Yet already, she was being treated like a threat. This was her gas station. This was her employee. And in that moment, she realized the ugly truth of what was happening in her stores every single day. The only question was, how far would he take it? This was only the beginning. If you've ever felt the sting of being judged unfairly, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments if you've ever faced a moment like this. Diana stood her ground, trying to process the baseless aggression. "I need to get gas," she said calmly. Brad didn't move. He crossed his arms, physically blocking her path. "Not here, you don't. We reserve the right to refuse service." "Why?" Diana asked, genuinely confused. "I have money." Brad's eyes scanned her from head to toe. "I don't like your attitude." "What attitude?" she replied, her voice even. Before she could say more, Tommy strutted out to join his boss. "Yeah," Tommy chimed in, enjoying the confrontation. "You look suspicious. We've had problems with people like you." The implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. "People like me?" Diana challenged. "What does that mean?" Brad stepped closer. "You know exactly what it means," he said, his voice low and contemptuous. Diana glanced at her fuel gauge. The light was blinking insistently. Panic began to creep in. "Please," she said. "I just need a few gallons. Where's the next station?" Brad's face twisted into a cruel smirk. "About an hour down the highway. Hope you make it." Tommy laughed. "Maybe you should have planned better." They were trying to strand her in the desert. Other customers were starting to notice. An older woman pumping gas stared, her mouth agape. A college student, sensing something deeply wrong, discreetly pulled out his phone and began to record. Just then, a white customer in his 40s called out, "Excuse me, can someone help me? This pump won't read my card." Instantly, Brad's demeanor shifted. A warm, friendly smile spread across his face as he rushed over. "Absolutely, sir. Let me get that for you. Sometimes these old pumps are finicky." Diana watched in disbelief as Brad bent over backward to help the man, treating him like royalty while she stood just 20 feet away, being denied basic service. The contrast was so blatant, so sickening she could hardly believe her eyes. "You're helping other customers," she called out. "Why won't you help me?" Brad walked back over, the friendly mask vanishing. "Because I said so. This is private property. You need to leave." Tommy, emboldened, went further. Yeah, why don't you go back to the city where you belong? This is a respectable neighborhood. I'm just trying to buy gas, Diana insisted. This is a public business. Public doesn't mean we serve everybody, Brad shot back, though. Some people just don't fit in. The eyes of every customer were on her now. This wasn't just refusal of service. It was public humiliation. An elderly woman stepped forward. Young man, that's no way to treat a customer. Ma'am, mind your own business, Brad snapped. Diana's desperation grew. My car is nearly empty. I might not make it to the next station. Brad's response was ice cold. Sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. He was willing to let a woman be stranded in the desert over the color of her skin. The cruelty was breathtaking. Diana stood there, an hour from anywhere, being refused service at her own business by her own employees. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. She had built this company to serve all people with dignity. Now, her own success was being used as a weapon against someone who looked just like her. What would you have done? Would you have revealed your identity, or held your ground as she did? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The situation was spiraling. Tommy, laughing, decided to escalate things even further. Maybe you should have filled up in your own neighborhood before coming to ours. Diana stared at him, her expression unreadable. My own neighborhood? What are you talking about? Brad stepped forward, his voice dripping with venom. Don't play dumb. We both know you don't belong here. The coded language was gone. The pretense was over. This was about race. This was about where she supposedly belonged. And that's when the mask came off completely. Brad raised his voice, his racism becoming explicit, wanting everyone at the gas station to hear what he had to say. Look, lady, the attendant began, his voice dripping with contempt. I don't know what ghetto you crawled out of, but we don't serve your kind here. Take your food stamps and your attitude and get out. The words struck Diana with the force of a physical blow. In all the years she had spent building her empire, in all the battles against discrimination she had fought and won, she had rarely faced racism so naked, so viciously proud. The man, Brad, wasn't even trying to hide it. He wore his hatred like a badge of honor. The assumptions he hurled at her were staggering, that she was poor, on government assistance, from a ghetto, all based on nothing more than the color of her skin. Emboldened by Brad's venom, his colleague Tommy added his own cruel twist. Yeah, he sneered, and good luck making it an hour on fumes. Maybe next time, you'll think twice about where you try to shop. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They weren't just refusing her service, they were actively hoping she'd be stranded in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Nevada desert. They were weaponizing her desperation. Diana realized with a chilling clarity that these men were so consumed by hate, they would rather see her in physical danger than simply sell her gasoline. The next station was an hour away. Her car was, indeed, running on fumes. Alone in the desert, a breakdown could become a serious threat. A volcano of rage began to build inside her, but she fought to keep it contained. She had learned long ago that losing her temper was a victory for them. Maintaining her dignity was her most potent weapon. You're refusing me service based on my race, she stated, her voice even. That is illegal. Brad unleashed a harsh, mocking laugh that echoed in the small store. Prove it. I'm refusing you service because I don't like you. That's my right. He was utterly confident, certain he could cloak his bigotry in a thin veil of personal dislike. He'd likely done it before. Then, he did something that drew gasps from the other customers. He began to feign crying, wiping away imaginary tears and making whimpering sounds. Oh no, the poor lady might run out of gas. Maybe she should have thought about that before disrespecting our business. He was savoring the image of her predicament, enjoying the thought of her being stranded. Diana's eyes swept across the other faces in the station. She saw shock, disgust. These were local people, and even they were appalled. Frank Wilson, a local mechanic fueling his truck, finally spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. This isn't right. She just wants gas. He was clearly uncomfortable, but his conscience had won. Brad's attention snapped to him, his voice turning menacing. Frank, you want to keep getting your truck serviced here? Mind your business. The threat was unmistakable. Brad was using economic intimidation to enforce his bubble of hate, silencing even a longtime customer who dared to appeal for basic decency. Frank's face was a mask of conflict. He wanted to do the right thing, but this station was vital to his livelihood. An elderly woman, Dorothy Martinez, pulled out her phone with trembling hands. "I'm calling the police," she announced, her voice shaking with emotion. "This is discrimination." "Call whoever you want," Brad shot back, his arrogance absolute. "We're not breaking any laws." Tommy nodded eagerly. "Yeah, tell them we refused service to someone with a bad attitude. That's not illegal." They had their story ready, a convenient lie to cover their tracks. Jessica, the young cashier, looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. The conflict was plain on her face. She knew this was wrong, but she was terrified of Brad and Tommy. Meanwhile, a college student named Tyler Johnson continued to record the entire scene on his phone, his expression one of utter disbelief. Brad decided it was time for his final, triumphant blow. He leaned in close to Diana, so close she could feel his hot, stale breath on her face. "You know what?" he whispered, his voice thick with malice. "I hope you do run out of gas. Maybe it'll teach you and your kind to stay where you belong. This is our town. We don't want you here." The words "your kind" hung in the air like a poison. All ambiguity was gone. This was pure, undiluted racism, delivered with maximum cruelty. "Yeah," Tommy laughed, relishing the moment. "Maybe being stuck on the side of the road will give you time to think about where you really belong." That was it. That was the line. Diana had endured the refusal, the slurs, the mockery, all with a steely composure. But their expressed hope for her to be stranded, to be in actual danger, that was a declaration of war. She had given them every chance to be decent. They had chosen to be monsters. With hands that were now perfectly steady, Diana pulled out her phone. The rage coursing through her was molten, but her actions were cold and precise. She speed-dialed a number. A familiar voice answered on the second ring. "David, it's Diana," she said, her tone calm and professional, betraying none of the fury within. It was the voice of a CEO. "Emergency at the Riverside location. I need you here immediately with security and HR." Brad erupted in another round of mocking laughter. "Who'd you call? Your baby daddy? Nobody's gonna help you here, sweetheart. You're in Trump country now." Tommy joined in. "Yeah, whoever that is, they can't do anything to us. We know our rights." They were so blinded by their hate, they couldn't conceive of a world where their actions had consequences. Diana ended the call and met Brad's gaze. The time had come. "I just called the head of operations for Williams Energy Corporation," she said, letting the words settle in the suddenly quiet room. "The company that owns this gas station. The company I built from scratch." Brad's laughter died in his throat. Tommy's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of dawning horror. Jessica, behind the counter, went ghost white. The truth descended upon them like an avalanche. For the last 20 minutes they had been tormenting the woman who owned their jobs, their futures, the very ground they stood on. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been completely inverted. Diana's voice was steady, each word a hammer blow. "In 7 minutes, my team will be here, and when I return, you're going to wish you had just sold me the gas." She turned and walked back to her car with her head held high, leaving them in the wreckage of their own making. Back in her car, the fuel light blinking like a frantic heartbeat, Diana took a deep breath. She reached into her travel bag and pulled out a sharp, tailored navy blue business suit, the one she'd planned to wear to her daughter Sarah's graduation. Right there, in the parking lot of her own gas station, she transformed. The casual jeans and Stanford sweatshirt came off. The power suit, the one from the cover of Forbes, went on. The desperate customer vanished. In her place sat the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation. She called her daughter. "Sarah, honey, it's Mom. I'm going to be late for your graduation. Mommy has to handle some business first. I promise I'll explain. I love you." Just as she hung up, 3 black SUVs pulled into the lot. Her team had arrived. David Kim, her brilliant head of operations, stepped out of the first. Rebecca Martinez, her no-nonsense HR director, emerged from the second, followed by 2 security personnel from the third. Diana met them in the parking lot, her voice a low, controlled fury as she briefed them. David's face grew darker with every racist slur she recounted. Rebecca took furious notes. "They actually said they hoped you'd run out of gas?" Rebecca asked, incredulous. "His exact words," Diana confirmed. "He said it would teach my kind to stay where we belong. David shook his head in disgust. Diana, I am so sorry. This is the opposite of everything we stand for. After a quick strategic review with security, Diana checked her watch. 7 minutes. It was time. They walked toward the store entrance, Diana leading the way, her posture radiating an authority that was absolute. The witnesses, Dorothy, Frank, Tyler, were all still there, waiting. Diana pushed open the door. She was no longer a customer. She commanded the room. Brad looked up, his face twisting with anger. I don't care what costume you put on. I want you off my property. A slight tremor in his voice betrayed him. He sensed something was wrong. Diana walked to the counter and placed her corporate ID and a business card in front of him. Embossed in gold lettering were the words, Diana Williams, Chief Executive Officer, Williams Energy Corporation. Your property? Diana asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Let's see the deed. Brad stared at the card as if it were written in a language he couldn't comprehend. Just then, David Kim stepped forward, opening a briefcase and spreading a sheaf of documents across the counter. Corporate ownership papers, David announced crisply. Williams Energy Corporation owns this location and 847 others. Ms. Williams is the founder, majority shareholder, and CEO. Rebecca laid down another file. And this is the employee handbook with the anti-discrimination policies you both signed. Brad's face cycled through shades of red, white, and green. The evidence was irrefutable. Tyler Johnson stepped forward, his phone held up. I have it all on video, he said, his voice ringing with the clarity of truth. The racism, the threats, everything. The dam broke. Jessica burst into tears. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Ms. Williams. I didn't know. Tommy began backing toward the rear exit, a coward to the last. It was all Brad. I was just following orders. A security guard shifted slightly, blocking his path. But Brad, even now, remained defiant. His prejudice was so deep, it rejected reality itself. This is a scam, he snarled. You people printed fake documents. He simply could not accept that a black woman could hold this kind of power over him. David looked at the man with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Mr. Patterson, I assure you, Ms. Williams built this company from a single gas station 20 years ago. Rebecca stepped forward, opening her file. Her voice was calm, official, and utterly final. Brad Patterson, Tommy Miller. As of this moment, your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will now escort you off the premises. We also have your employment file, Mr. Patterson, the voice continued calm and methodical. It includes the anti-discrimination training you completed upon hiring and the policies you signed, agreeing to treat all customers with respect and dignity. The walls of the small convenience store seemed to press in on Brad from every direction. Corporate documents, video evidence, witness testimony, and his own signature on forgotten forms. A mountain of proof was burying him alive. Dorothy Martinez, who had followed the group inside, watched the confrontation with rapt fascination. I saw the whole thing, she announced, her voice cutting through the tense air. This man refused to sell that lady gasoline, said he hoped she'd be stranded in the desert. Frank Wilson, the mechanic, nodded grimly. It was the most racist thing I've ever witnessed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A murmur went through the other customers. One by one, those who had seen fragments of the encounter began to speak up, their voices joining a chorus of condemnation. The verdict was unanimous. Brad and Tommy had engaged in blatant, undeniable racism. And in the center of it all stood Diana. She was no longer the victim, but the orchestrator. She had revealed her identity, assembled her team, gathered her evidence, and now she confronted her employees before a jury of their own customers. She stood in the heart of her own gas station, surrounded by the wreckage of their bigotry, poised to deliver justice. The time for mercy had long since passed. The window for second chances had slammed shut. These men had shown their true character, and now they would face the consequences. She turned first to Brad, the manager who had led this disgraceful display of hatred. Her voice was quiet, yet it resonated with the unmistakable authority of someone who had built an empire from the ground up. Brad Patterson, you are fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. You attempted to strand a customer in the desert because of her race. You used explicit racial slurs. You threatened others who tried to defend basic human decency. Clean out your locker and leave. Brad's face was a rapid cascade of emotions. Shock gave way to denial. then hardened into anger, before crumbling into desperate panic. "You can't do this to me. I have rights. I'll sue you." Diana's reply was like ice. "You had the right to treat every customer with dignity. You chose racism instead. Security will now escort you out." The security team stepped forward, two imposing figures that signaled the end of Brad's petty tyranny. His protests grew louder, more frantic, as the reality of his ruin finally sank in. Diana then turned her gaze to Tommy, who was trying to shrink into the background. "Tommy Rodriguez, you are also fired. Your behavior was not only cruel, it was criminal. You laughed at the thought of a woman being stranded. You made vile comments about welfare and reservations. You're done here." Tommy's cowardly facade disintegrated. "Please, Ms. Williams, I need this job. I have bills." It was just a few jokes. "Racism isn't a joke, Tommy," Diana said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "And cruelty is not entertainment. You made your choice the moment you decided to endanger a customer for the color of her skin." Finally, her attention fell on Jessica, the young cashier who had been crying quietly in the corner. Some might have expected leniency for her, given she hadn't actively participated. "Jessica Chen, you are also fired." The words hung in the air. "Your silence enabled this hatred. You stood by and watched as your co-workers engaged in blatant racism. You had multiple chances to intervene, to do the right thing, to show a shred of human decency. You chose complicity instead." Jessica's sobs grew heavier. "But I was scared. I didn't know what to do." Diana's response was forged from a lifetime of fighting such battles. "Being scared is understandable, Jessica, but staying silent in the face of hatred makes you part of the problem. I require employees who will stand up for what is right, not those who will watch quietly as our customers are abused." With all 3 employees terminated, Diana addressed everyone in the store. "This station will be closed for the next week for a complete restaffing and retraining. We will reopen with a team that understands we serve everyone with dignity and respect." But she wasn't finished. Diana walked back outside to the pumps. In front of all the witnesses who had seen her humiliated and threatened, she picked up a nozzle and began to pump gas into her own car. The symbolism was potent. The woman who had been refused service was now serving herself at her own business, on her own terms. As security escorted the fired employees to their cars, the community's response was immediate. Dorothy Martinez approached Diana, her eyes wet with tears. "Honey, in my entire life, I have never seen justice served so perfectly. They really tried to leave you for dead out there. I'm 68 years old, and I've seen a lot of wrong in this world, but I have never seen someone stand up to it like you just did." Tyler Johnson was practically vibrating with excitement, his phone held up like a torch. "Ms. Williams, this video is already going viral. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, it's everywhere. People need to see what real accountability looks like. You just showed the world that racism has consequences." Frank Wilson, the mechanic, approached her with his head lowered. "Ma'am, I should have done more. I should have been louder, stood up to them more forcefully. I'm sorry I didn't do enough to help you." Diana's reply was filled with grace. "Frank, you tried to help when it was easier to stay silent. That matters. The important thing is that we all learn from this, and we all do better next time." Others began to approach, expressing their shock and their admiration. Word was spreading through the small town like wildfire. As Diana finished pumping her gas, she turned to the crowd that had gathered. "Let me be clear. No customer will ever be refused service at any of my 848 gas stations because of who they are, what they look like, or where they come from. We serve everyone. That is not just our policy, it is our promise." The crowd erupted in applause. In their faces, Diana saw not just approval, but respect. She had transformed a moment of profound humiliation into a powerful lesson for an entire community. Back in her car, she immediately called her daughter. Sarah answered on the first ring. "Sarah, honey, it's Mom. I'm fueled up and on my way to your graduation, and I have quite a story to tell you about standing up to hate and why everything you've worked for matters so much." Sarah's voice was electric. "Mom, someone already sent me the video. It's everywhere. I can't believe what they said to you, and I can't believe how you handled them." A small, proud smile touched Diana's lips as she started the engine. "Sometimes, baby, you have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard, even when people try to make you feel like you don't belong. You belong wherever you choose to be." As she drove away, the gas station receding in her rearview mirror, Diana reflected. She had turned an act of racist hatred into an undeniable statement about justice. 3 people had lost their jobs, a community had learned that discrimination would not be tolerated, and a video was spreading across the globe, a testament to the fact that actions have consequences. But more importantly, she was on her way to celebrate her daughter's graduation from Stanford University. She was driving toward the culmination of everything she had fought for, the next generation, achieving dreams that were once unimaginable. Diana had started the day a CEO. She had briefly been made a victim. But she ended it as something far more powerful, a symbol of justice, and a living reminder that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. The gas station behind her would reopen in a week, reborn. The video of the confrontation would inspire countless others, and Diana Williams would arrive at Stanford just in time to watch her daughter walk across that stage, a living embodiment of her legacy. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. And Diana had just transformed a moment of pure hate into a lesson for the world. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they too can learn. We'll see you in our next video.